How can how can institutions, teams, and leaders help make that self-sustaining compassion possible? Our panel brings together professionals who have navigated these questions in very real settings. We'll share personal insights into recognizing early warning signs of burnout, practical self care strategies that truly fit busy lives, and ways to build collective resilience that make well being a shared endeavor. I am Yolanda Harper, program chair and professor, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to work with this group of colleagues to bring you this session, each of whom will now introduce themselves.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Felicia Banks, Associate Faculty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Robinson. I work in academic integrity, and I also work in PhD education program.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Jackie Kyger here, retired military, 20 years in the Coast Guard, 20 years now in higher education. I work in the Master of Arts in Education. It's truly my pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for caring and being here.
I'm Sam Passey. I'm in academic advising, and I also oversee a portion of the honor students here.
Hi, I'm Kim Tamares. I'm an Access and Wellness Counselor here at UAGC.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephani Kilby. I am UAGC's Director of Student Success, and I'm so excited to share this space with all of you.
Now you see why I'm excited about this phenomenal team. Today, our panel will explore burnout and compassion fatigue, boundaries, and leadership supports for well-being, while at the same time sharing experiences and strategies to sustain compassion and effectiveness in non-stop cultures. We will have time for Q&A, as Brandy mentioned, and we also invite you to share questions and comments in real time in the chat. Now, let's begin by exploring how we recognize the early signs that our own compassion may be running low. Our first question is for Felicia. What are early signs of compassion fatigue and burnout?
Greetings, everyone. Burnout is a feeling of mental, physical, or emotional exhaustion that can occur as a result of overwork. The following are a few symptoms and or signs of burnout. Mental burnout, draining work, dreading work, lack of interest or motivation, decreased sense of accomplishment, uncontrollable procrastination, feeling incapable of coping with new challenges, physical burnout, exhaustion, chronic stress, inconsistent sleep habits, sudden or frequent health problems ranging from headaches and colds to mental health illnesses like depression and anxiety, emotional burnout, cynicism at work, irritability or anger at work, suddenly and intensely disliking your job, feelings of hopelessness at work, feeling like you should isolate yourself from others. Although many of these symptoms and or signs could occur simultaneously, they tend to occur in stages. Next slide, please. There are 5 stages of burnout. The first stage is the honeymoon stage. The individual may feel creative and productive as they begin their new job or task with high energy and enthusiasm. The second stage is onset of stress. The individual may feel their optimism waning and productivity diminishing. There may also be some irritability and or anxiety during this stage. The third stage is chronic stress. The individual may feel resentfulness, cynicism, and powerlessness. The fourth stage is burnout. The individual may feel empty, have self-doubt, and have a desire to isolate from others. The fifth stage is habitual burnout. The individual may experience significant and ongoing mental, physical, and emotional symptoms like chronic sadness and depression. Next slide, please. It's sometimes difficult to notice burnout, particularly if you've been struggling with it for a long time or don't pay much attention to your own needs. It can also look and feel like depression, although depression is a different type of challenge and requires a different kind of treatment. Answering the questions in the slide above on the left can give you an idea of whether it is worth arranging a professional assessment. If you answer yes to most of these questions, you may be struggling with burnout. The Copenhagen Burnout Inventory, CBI, developed by Danish researchers, screens for personal, work-related, and client-related exhaustion. The CBI provides a low, moderate, high, or very high score for each category. The CBI is free, does not require registration or an email, and it's private. After completing a screening, you receive a web link to view your results.
Thank you, Felicia, for helping us understand those warning signs and for providing practical resources for screening. You know, recognizing when our compassion is running low is an important act of self-care. Now, to consider the question of differentiating among normal fatigue, compassion fatigue, burnout, and emotional overload, we'll return to the 5 colleagues that I introduced you to at the beginning of our session. Earlier, you met Parker, Casey, Taylor, Jordan, and Riley. Now, we'll put a brief description of each in the chat and then launch a poll for you to identify what each is most likely experiencing. So, we'd love for you to participate in our poll. To do so, scan the QR code or type slido.com into your browser and enter the number you see below. 7013056. And we'll give you a little time to get to slido.com and you'll select A, B, or C for which combination best fits our colleagues here. Takes a little time for it to pop up. There we go. So the votes are starting to come in. Okay, we'll give a few more seconds and Brandy, let me know, please, if anybody's also voting in the chat.
Okay. Right now, we do not have any votes in the chat.
Okay, so Slido.com seems to be working. Yay. Okay, so we see that C has the most votes, and indeed, C best fits this particular scenario we see here. It's the most correct choice of the 3. Parker recovers easily with rest, so that's normal fatigue. Casey's numbness and feelings of guilt for diminishing empathy represent compassion fatigue. Taylor's hiding inner hurt is an example of masked pain. Jordan's cynicism, dread, and dreams of quitting their job are often seen in burnout. And Riley's emotional storms, including feeling overwhelmed, are typically associated with emotional overload. Now, in reality, it is possible to be more than one. And Taylor was included because performative positivity is a common sign that can be associated with suppressed overload, early burnout, or early compassion fatigue. So if you're comfortable sharing in the chat, feel free to let us know if you can relate to one or more of these colleagues, either currently or in the past, as we transition to the next question that each of our panelists will address. So let's turn to what helps. In this question, we see a prompt for us to share concrete self-care practices and micro habits that actually fit our real, sometimes messy workdays. We'll start with Sam. What personal strategies or daily micro habits help you stay resilient amid ongoing student needs and institutional demands?
Okay. I'm not perfect at this. I'm always trying to improve on this. Now, if anything I say doesn't make sense, just remember this. Do the things you want to do. When you're in that circumstance, like, be okay with who you are. For example, with me, I find that wherever I go, I find if I can express myself, even if it's accurate or inaccurate, and I'm always ready for that, is that I find my energy just goes up. That's something I find for myself. Now, what strategies have I found effective? I actually would love to maybe reference some of the philosophers that I've read in these past couple of years. There was actually a book when we were in the office that I spent way too long on that was nice and small, but the context was dense enough for me. So basically, Nietzsche described in his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, that one of the things that's common for people is that you can have like 5 different goals. Now, something that happens with these 5 different goals that you may have is they all start to fight over each other. I see this with my students as well. Those that are like, oh, I want to graduate as soon as possible, but I also want to get honors. And honors takes work and time. I really do try for most cases, or not most cases, but some cases I do try to can I get the best of both worlds for the student? Can we get both of these goals? But sometimes, like Nietzsche said, that these goals sometimes conflict. And then I have to say to the student, and again, also with each other, which one are you willing to put to the side? Which one comes second place? Nothing against second place, just which one do you want to accomplish first? What is most important to you? Do you want to graduate now, or do you want to get that band of honors as well? This is something that come across that I find has actually been very effective with me with working with students. The other thing I want to point out was Seneca. Seneca, back in Rome, one thing he said is, what is it that inflames your heart? Again, for me, I found it's when I express myself, I drive, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's some biopsychosocial thing going on there, but either way, I just know that's the energy that comes for me. And again, find out what it is with you. I don't believe that each strategy, be open to trying things, maybe even sample things, see something a little bit, see what does it produce, despite how quirky or how strange something may look. I've noticed that even with colleagues that I've worked with, that even to me, I'm like, oh, I would never have suspected when I work with this person, we produce such great results. I don't even understand why, but I just know when I work with this person, things get done, or even the results just turn miraculous. And you could see us on 3 months and so forth. So there from our history of philosophers.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everyone. About 5 years ago, I completed my dissertation on teacher wellness, and I learned about so many of the most impactful strategies for dealing with burnout. What I really learned, though, is that everyone's different, and some strategies work with some people, some don't, just like what Sam just said. You have to find what works for you. What really works for me, though, is mindfulness. It's really just a fancy way of saying I focus on the present moment. What I do to kickstart my mindful focus is I close my eyes, I play a background bass line in my head, clear all my thoughts. I also have a timer at my workstation to get up every hour, forget what I'm doing completely, and pace around my kitchen in a mindful way. I clear my thoughts. I just focus on the steps that I'm taking, making sure I don't stub my toes and I don't run into my cat. Some of you may remember the very first Culture of Care Summit we had a couple years ago. I gave a talk on mindful eating at the time. And by looking at me, you're probably thinking, wow, he's gained so much weight. He must have really mastered mindful eating. But mindfulness can be a huge benefit for everyone, whether you're an educator or not. It allows people to compartmentalize their focus. When you're really focusing on the present moment, you detach yourself from reflecting on the past, worrying about the future. You enjoy the time you have outside of work, no matter how long that period may be. And there are 3 key dimensions of mindfulness: paying attention to the present moment, recognizing and labeling your emotions in the present moment, and the capacity for self-awareness. If you're stressed about anything in your life, mindfulness can allow you to focus on the task at hand and not cognitively stray, which gives students a much more focused learning experience. And as a skill set, educators who practice mindfulness have been more mindful about their teaching and had higher quality relationships with the students in their courses. Thank you.
Thank you both for your insights. Working in Access and Wellness, our university's Disability Services Department, I work with students to promote an equitable academic experience while also assisting them in navigating disclosed well-being challenges. So as someone with empathy as their top strength, this role can drain me very easily. So a few things that I practice for myself to keep me grounded and prevent burnout. I first set and review my priorities. I begin my work day or work week by looking through my calendar and my inbox. This helps me mentally prepare for the more time-intensive or challenging tasks. Taking care of the quicker items first allows me to focus more fully on everything else and be present for those pieces. Along with this, I create boundaries for contact when I do contact my students. They can make appointments with me for a set time frame via our scheduling system, which definitely helps me better plan out my day and my week. I get to know my students pretty well, and when I remember that they can be a bit chatty, I will let them know at the beginning of our call how much time I have dedicated to that. This helps us both maintain the focus of the interaction and get their concerns heard and solutions provided so that we're not, spending so much time going back and forth about things that may not be as important as their initial question. Now, working remotely has also changed how we interact with one another. So I also make sure that I'm checking in with my team or close friends throughout the day. This helps to remind me that I'm not alone in this virtual environment. We send, photos, stories, we just little things to each other throughout the day to make sure we connect. And lastly, like most of my panelists, I make sure that I take tons of movement breaks throughout the day to step away from the computer and stop being that little cramped creature hovering over that keyboard that is trying to chug through that one last thing through the day.
Those tips that have been shared so far are so great. I'm taking so many notes from my colleagues on screen. But I want to share a couple strategies that I use briefly. For me, it really is about grounding myself outside of our digital environment. It's so easy to get caught up in Teams and emails and calls. That it's like, how do I remove myself from that space for just a minute and remind myself what I want to focus on today? So I'm all about like old school pen and paper. One is that this is a relatively new habit for me, but every morning I grab my Post-it notes and I write down one thing. If I look at today and I can only make progress on one thing, what would allow me to leave at the end of the day feeling like I accomplished something? And that one thing goes on my Post-it note, and that Post-it note goes on the wall over my computer. So that if I start to feel like I'm losing control of my day, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling feelings of burnout, whatever it might be, that's the Post-it note that grounds me for the day. Focus on that and walk away knowing that I achieved something that I wanted to today, and I can feel good about that. The other thing that I like to do is stay grounded in gratitude. Sometimes when we think about showing care, the weight of caring is a lot, but caring also allows you to receive. There's something in that. And so I have at my desk Everyday Achievement Awards. It's just a notepad. I used to have these in the office, and then I lost that when we went remote because it was like, well, I can't put handwritten notes on people's desks anymore. But guess what? You still can get people handwritten notes, and there's something therapeutic in the writing of these handwritten notes for me that helps me reset. So grounding myself in gratitude and making notes, and then I snap a picture of it and send off an email that shows my handwritten note to that colleague or whoever it was that did something that is seemingly every day, but mattered so much. Thanks for checking in on me. Thanks for being present in our one-on-one today. Thank you for sharing that student story. Whatever it might be, those are those everyday moments that not only matter to others, but they help me stay grounded in why we're here. So it's all about staying grounded, sometimes removing yourself from digital environment and reminding yourself you can care deeply, but you're not individually responsible for every outcome. Our work is shared work.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. I like a good list, so I can appreciate a good Post-it note as well. I begin with the end in mind. I wish I could tell you I made that up, but Stephen Covey made it up about 35 years ago, and it's worked for me for the last 35 years. I include, with the end in mind, with my students, I begin with empathy when I seek their end in mind, meeting them where they're at. And I include in the organizational structure of where we get things done that as well, the organizational structure, part of the institutional need. I try to bring order to that. And I start with my inbox. That's the number one way they seem to communicate and we seem to find one another. And I have a physical pen and paper. I keep a checklist. I keep a checklist on my desk in my steno book from the 20th century when shorthand was popular. It's familiar. It was something I did in the military. It's something I do here. I bring it with me into the 21st century of exciting higher education endeavors. The old steno book sits next to my modern day Apple MacBook. I know I could keep my notes there, but I don't. I begin with the end in mind. I write them down and I get them done. I start with a daily made checklist on my terms. That's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kyger. Actually, I practice self-compassion. I have learned and understand that all I can do is what I can do. I set boundaries. I monitor my stress levels. I try different stress management techniques. For example, I do gentle yoga and watch old movies. I make time for exercise. I ensure that I walk in my neighborhood 5 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes. I practice good sleep hygiene. I'm still working on that one, but I've gotten better. Overall, I do things that make me happy.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, I've learned something from everyone, so I guess it's my time. Some of my strategies are overlapping. Over the years, I've acquired a treasure chest of wellness activities, some of which afford me longer breaks, and many of which I can do in small chunks, anywhere from 1 to 30 minutes, depending on what it is. For example, yoga, tai chi, mindfulness, deep breathing, spending time in nature. If the weather's nice, I might run into my backyard and sit on the grass for 5 minutes in the sun. Hiking, biking, herbal teas, acupuncture, massage therapy, music, acting, and laughter yoga. Yes, laughter yoga. Now, for those of you who are wondering what that is, I invite you to join me in room 2 at 12:30 p.m. today, Pacific time, for Laughter Yoga Live. And in addition to forcing myself to and reminding myself to get up and get away from my chair from time to time, my work chair is a balance ball, which for me is very, very helpful and energizing. A big thank you to each of our panelists for sharing strategies, and we invite all of you present as well to share strategies in the chat that you find helpful in your own lives. Now, I noticed a strong theme that caring well for others is enhanced by caring well for self. Now, and these small intentional practices may sound simple, but they are often the first things to go when demands start piling up. With that in mind, let's talk about how to protect those practices when the pressure is high, especially around boundaries and a constant pull to say yes, 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 okay, no problem, I'll do it. All right, so
So
how do you set and maintain healthy boundaries in a culture of constant care? Felicia will start us off here.
I provided the following prompt in chatgpt.com. I am an online instructor teaching a 5-week course with 15 to 18 students. I have 2 to 3 1-hour weekly meetings and one project every other month. Discussion grades are due on Thursdays and weekly assignment grades are due on Sundays. I must post final grades the 6th week of the course. I also have to ensure that I answer any student questions or concerns within 48 hours. I enjoy walking 5 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes. I like for Tuesdays to be a light work day, for example, just responding to emails or completing projects. I do not want to do any work on Saturdays. I would like to have Saturdays as a free day or family day. What is a good time management schedule or plan of action for good work-life balance that will prevent burnout? ChatGPT provided an extensive plan of action to prevent burnout. However, for the sake of time, I posted the following summary strategy. I have also created a ChatGPT plan of action for my learners. In addition to these strategies, I also incorporate the following time savers in my courses. Next slide, please. Schedule weekly announcements. For example, resources providing information about how to take a quiz could decrease our learners' questions and or concerns about possible quiz and or test anxiety. Frequently asked questions from emails could be compiled in one document for our learners to reference when or as needed. UAGC also provides a wonderful resource for frequently asked questions. Next slide, please. The facilitator's launch post during week 1 discussion is a wonderful way to break the ice and set the tone for a modeled discussion post. If there is an existing FAQs document, it could also be shared with a discussion post. Next slide, please. I like to ensure that I respond to each of my learners at least once between weeks 2 through 5 discussions. The notes section in Canvas helps me keep track effortlessly. I receive a few emails weekly regarding requests for extensions or there may be missing assignments. I use the extension indicator to provide 2 to 3 day extension and notate the extension in the comment section. Doing so saves both me and the learner time in communicating the request and or approval of an extension.
Thank you so much for those practical tips provided that we can use with the resources that we have within Canvas as well. And that was so interesting to see what ChatGPT came up with. Now, let's hear from Michael and Sam on the same topic. Michael?
Thank you. Yeah, I like Felicia, I like structure. I have 2 jobs at UAGC. Full-time, I work in academic integrity. I meet with students. I review assignments. I meet with colleagues. It's more than a full-time job, honestly. And then when I get off work from that job, I work as a dissertation chair for PhD education students. And that requires a lot of extra reading, really focused feedback on academic writing. It can get pretty boring sometimes. But I also meet with my students too. So sometimes it's late nights and it's just a lot of work in general. As I mentioned before, I like to focus on the present moment and what's in front of me. So if I bring my laptop to the couch, I'm not going to watch TV or pet my cat. I'm going to end up working again. I can't work like that. I get too distracted. I have to have this healthy work-life balance. If I'm working, I'm working. If I'm not working, I'm not working, and I'm not thinking about it. So I cut myself off by saying, hey, Michael, work is for the workstation. Life is for the couch with the cat. Once I leave the workstation for the day, I'm done working. That's the only way I can compartmentalize it. Another interesting point, I used to be a percussionist in a Latin jazz funk band many years ago. If music is playing, my brain immediately focuses on it and I start drumming on everything in sight, including my keyboard. I cannot work at whatsoever. It's just not productive. So another boundary I set is I don't play music when I work. I love music, but I just cannot play music when I'm working. I can't work that way. I know many people are the opposite, but I just cannot focus like that because I end up focusing on the music. But thank you.
All right. I'm gonna ask everyone to say a word. I think this word may have been conditioned with us to be something of like negative or not good, but I just want everyone to actually, just this season, this moment, this time, hear this word. Don't think, oh, the gloves are coming on. Error. Do not think of error as your enemy. Now, Sam, what are you talking about? That's how we measure things. That's how we do this. Often I find at least with myself and from those that I also have been around, is where is your frequency of error? Now, where is this error trying to tell you? For me, I find I am erring or having high frequency of error when I go to engage in things. My boss says, Sam, you shoot from the hip. You just jump and go. And this, now don't get me wrong, you're always ready to help. You're always ready to do this. Do you need to speed up because you're not engaging enough? Or do you need to put on the brakes and slow down a little more? One thing that has been very, very helpful for me has been when I get feedback from my teammates, they say, Sam, slow down, but not in a bad sense, but just like take it easy or disengage. Now, what does that look like though? How does this manifest? I was working with a student. Together, me and him, despite our great endurances, I brought him back. I would say me and the student, brought each other back from a dismissal, which is one of the, like, it digs a hole very fast. We came back twice from it. And I couldn't find a way. It was almost like my very chemical property was doing something to the equation that was just doing something wrong. And even though the student was like, oh, Sam, I still want to work with you. I still want to do this. And I finally was just like, I want you to succeed. Despite as awesome as I want to have you get kicked over into honors or this or that, or at least once at 4 years, I'm going to step back. I want you to try a new advisor. Now, don't get me wrong. My pride was very, Sam, what are you doing here? You make yourself look like, but I've noticed that doing that breaks, taking what others have seen and say, oh no, you got the energy, Sam. It's great. There, I've already explained of what my energy could do, but it's knowing when to take that rest, not to spiral so hard. And better yet, passing it on to give someone else a time to shine.
Wow, very well said, both of you. Thank you, Sam and Michael, for that. Next, building on boundary setting, consider the question here. In a culture that rewards saying yes, what helps you decide what you can honestly manage and still take care of yourself? Let's begin with Jackie.
Well, certainly. And remember, when I was in the Coast Guard, I started a lot of phrases like that. When I was in the Coast Guard, but we were taught early on that you can't save someone else. You can't be a part of that rescue team if you can't save yourself. There was a saying, one hand for you, one hand for the Coast Guard, because there was a balance in doing that rescue work. And in that balance, in doing that work, I've never rescued anyone, for the most part, who didn't want to be rescued. They had a viable interest in their success, the outcome of that. And there are occasions where they don't have that, and you have to do all the work. You have to do all the heavy lifting, but it can't be all me. It can't be all you. They've got to want to at least swim in the direction of safety if they can. So same is true with my students. They must be invested in that outcome. So part of it is showing them to be mindful of that and how to be that. So my boundaries for yes is not helping my students succeed with just simply throwing them one more lifeline, because that doesn't always serve them well. So I spend time with them, trying to help them understand that that same energy that they're now spending swimming towards the lifeline could have been that same energy that kept them in the boat, kept them on track, kept them progressing through their course as planned to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, for your thoughtful words. Now, I approach this by first saying yes to myself internally before responding out loud. And it may seem a little backwards, but it gives me the space to evaluate the request honestly. I treat each ask of a yes, can you do this, as a puzzle piece. I consider how and where it might fit into my own existing schedule. Is it like a corner piece that easily clicks into place? Do I have the bandwidth to take it on? Or is it an oddly shaped piece that feels difficult to integrate into what I'm already doing and handling? If it seems too overwhelming or disruptive to the bigger picture, I recognize that it's okay to decline and say no. And at the end of the day, I remind myself to practice what I preach to my students. I'm also a person who needs care. Giving myself grace means accepting that I cannot always say yes to every request, and that's okay.
This is such a great question because I think we do have a culture that rewards saying yes. And I don't know about anybody else in the room, but over and over, people have told me, you need to learn to say no. And it's like, well, okay, but we have a culture that rewards saying yes. And to be quite honest, saying no doesn't work for me. It doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't really work for my role where nearly everything that comes my way is about improving student outcomes, student experience. So how could I possibly say no when we're talking about things that matter to our students? So what I've done is I don't try to say no more often because I know it doesn't work. For me, I've learned to distinguish between urgency and importance. In student success work, everything feels important, and probably everything is important, but not everything is urgent. And so differentiating that for myself and in conversations with others helps with priority. And then instead of saying no, I try to say yes, if. Yes, if we can shift X. Yes, if we can wait until next week. Yes, if we can adjust that scope or what we're trying to deliver on. Yes, if we can include others. Forcing ourselves to think through, we want to say yes, but what do we need to do to truly make yes happen and to feel good about it and to be able to deliver in full and with quality and be present. So for me, the strategy is differentiating importance and urgency and how do we accommodate yes and working within those types of boundaries.
Wow, thank you, Jackie, Kim, and Stephanie. What you've all described is that self-care is more than warm baths and breathing exercises, albeit highly recommended. It's also about self-management, the ability to say no, not right now, or even yes, if requires that we are able to take that risk because it can feel risky in cultures that rewards endless availability. But saying yes sustainably begins with saying yes to our own well-being. Now, let's shift from individual acts of self-protection to shared responsibility. What does it look like when our leaders and our systems make boundaries and well-being expected and even rewarded? Our first question in the leadership and structural support segment is how can leadership at departmental or institutional levels support resilience and wellness for all employees? Let's begin with Stephanie.
Thank you, Dr. Harper. Boy, this is something I think about a lot. I love that we have Culture of Care Summit dedicating 3 days to care, but it shouldn't feel like a disconnect from our everyday. It should feel like a part of where we are. And so this is really important because we put the burden of self-care on the individual. We know what we need for ourselves, right? But leadership can support that in the way that our environments are structured. And something I've been thinking a lot about is that collapse happens when care lives only in individual heroics. I want to say that again because I think it's important. Collapse happens when care lives only in individual heroics. People are personally stepping in. They're working extra hours. They are taking on more than their role, fixing problems informally outside of normal processes. These are the same people that carry emotional and operational burdens on themselves. So if we're thinking about sustainable compassion and resilience, that lives in the design of our work. It lives in the design of our processes and our structures. It doesn't live in one person raising their hand over and over again. That's not sustainable. So leaders need to establish clear boundaries and expectations and co-create with teams escalation pathways and off-ramps so that indicators, people are aware of indicators that might signal that support is needed. That helps leaders partner with teams in understanding, like, great that you're taking it on, but you don't have to. So let's really think about what this looks like. Here's how to know if it's becoming too much. Here's how I will know that maybe I need to provide some extra support or grace. And leaders need to give permission to not solve everything alone. People love to be heroes. There is a place and time for that. Heroic efforts over and over again it's a design flaw. So that's why I would ask leaders to be mindful of.
Well, let me just say quickly then what Stephani said, because it's spot on. I appreciate it, and especially the part about the heroics. Leadership can support resilience, certainly by helping faculty maintain that balance. When institutions clearly define those expectations, provide structural support, and normalize those healthy boundaries, they do allow us educators so we can care deeply without carrying every outcome alone. Sustainable support does not come, as Stephani said, that individual heroic. It comes from systems that encourage responsibility, that shared effort, and the understanding that everyone must swim towards the boat. Thank you.
Thank you, both Stephani and Jackie. The next question is a big one. What institutional practices or policies unintentionally contribute to burnout? And how might we reimagine them to foster shared responsibility for care while supporting compassion without collapse? Let's begin with Kim.
This question brings me back to my time working as an academic advisor way before I was an access and wellness counselor. And remembering that within all institutions, there's a strong emphasis on student retention, which can unintentionally contribute to burnout. Advisors often carry the responsibility of maintaining frequent outreach, identifying struggling students and connecting with them with resources all the time, all the while maintaining and managing large caseloads. This creates pressure to constantly do more, sometimes without clear boundaries, sometimes or shared systems of support. Questions come about like, how much outreach is enough? Which campaigns are most effective? How do we support student-facing academic concerns or medical challenges? Can this feel, this can definitely feel ongoing and overwhelming when the responsibility falls heavily on individual staff members. In my experience here, I've seen a shift towards reimagining this model in a way that fosters a shared responsibility and reduces the burnout. Now, we have, what I've definitely seen is, providing or building efficiencies into the workflow, such as, automated outreach templates, batch communication tools, multiple methods of connection like text messaging, Zoom phone calls. Support becomes more distributed, sustainable, rather than relying on solely like an individual effort. So these practices allow advisors, counselors, staff alike to meet students where they are without carrying the full emotional and stress alone. Additionally, creating spaces for connection, such as like networking opportunities through like UAGC Connect, help students feel engaged and supported, which in turn can reduce the pressure on staff and to continuously re-motivate them to remain in school. Ultimately, when institutions design systems that share this type of responsibility of care and streamlining that support, it becomes definitely possible to practice compassion in a way that is sustainable, supporting both students and staff without leading to burnout.
Thank you, Jen. In many ways, organizations, the individuals who within those organizations who care the most about the students or the mission, cares most about the mission, they're the ones who become continually asked to do it, to fix the problem, to take on more responsibility. And over time, that turns commitment into exhaustion. And sadly, self seldom realizes one's own exhaustion. Seldom do we recognize, I never knew when I was hypothermic. I just knew I was cold in the water. That's a very dangerous place to be. And in the Coast Guard, we understood that even the stronger swimmers had limits. If the system depends on a few people constantly swimming harder to keep everything else afloat, the design itself is what needs attention, not the people. Burnout often appears where there's a gap between responsibility and authority, where people are expected to solve these problems that they don't have the structural support or maybe the resources to solve them, but they try anyways. They swim anyways. Another contributor is when policies rely too heavily on that individual flexibility instead of the consistent process. And what begins as well-intended accommodation can slowly become an expectation that faculty or staff will personally manage every exception. That becomes the norm. So without clear boundaries and that shared procedures, the emotional and administrative load, it grows heavier. It grows with time. It just becomes more. So healthy institutions recognize that caring about people and protecting the people doing the work that's not competing with priorities. So when systems are designed well, compassion is supported by structure rather than carried solely by those standing under the structure. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. I think I was supposed to probably identify some specific institutional practices or policies, but I actually want to take just a little bit of a step back and identify two signals or indicators that I think might help all of you recognize where there's policies or processes in your part of the world that are contributing here to burnout. So the first is making exceptions repeatedly. If there is a space where you're making exceptions over and over again for the same pain point, that's not actually compassion. It feels pretty good to make an exception. And the person receiving it is probably like, whew, I got the exception, thank goodness. But why isn't that compassion? It's because it's a signal that maybe a redesign is needed. If you're making exceptions over and over, that's indicating friction with a policy or a process, and friction contributes and leads to burnout. So where are you making continuous exceptions? That might be a policy process to look at. The other one, it's something that I spoke about a little bit ago, but I'm just so passionate about this, is that when every project is framed as urgent, people lose clarity around what they should be focusing on. Like, hello, lack of prioritization is a burnout multiplier. And that's really on all of us. As leaders, make sure people know what the priorities are. If priorities are changing, make sure to communicate that. Make sure that there's not so many priorities that people are left to their own to try to figure out what's most important at any given time. So clarity around priorities. But guess what, team members? It's on us too. If we don't know what priorities are, we need to be communicating that back to leaders. We need to ask. We need to say like, hey, I'm getting too many signals right now. Let's reset. Help me understand where to focus. This is a partnership. And so watching for those repeated exceptions and then also watching for lack of clarity around priorities. Those are two indicators you can use to understand where there might be policies or processes that are getting in the way of your health and well-being and contributing to burnout.
Thank you, all three of you, Kim, Jackie, and Stephani. You've given us a powerful picture of how leadership, policies, practices, and everyday expectations can either drain or replenish us. Self-care is essential. We know that, but it's not sufficient if the system keeps burning people out. Now for our final segment, several panelists will share closing remarks with examples from their own experiences, beginning with Felicia.
Thank you, Dr. Harper. I have learned to create at least one protective day a week, Saturday. For example, a day of mindfulness, rejuvenation, a family fun day. I do not log into the classroom on my protective day. However, sometimes I check emails. Tuesdays are light work days. For example, a catch-up day. I check emails, I work on projects, and depending on the course start date, I may not log into the course. Thank you.
Like you, Felicia, I set intentional boundaries within my day and my week by blocking off time to decompress after particularly stressful calls or student situations. In roles that require a high level of empathy and problem solving, I found it very important to create this space rather than to continuously push through those moments. I'm also mindful of the tendency to try to complete one just one more task, just one more thing, one more email. I actively work against that by honoring the limits I've set for my workday. And one of my most effective strategies for maintaining balance throughout my day is using my children's return home from school as a hard transition point. When they get home, I log off from my computer. I shift my focus fully to my family. This allows me time to reset emotionally and be more present, both as a parent and as a professional for the next workday.
I'm going to take Kim's that my time is really, really small right now. And also, I think will be useful is Michael's meditation, mindfulness, maybe even prayer on some other individuals. I share with you, again, Sam's nowhere near a master in this. My most useful thing that I have found that has produced the best results for me has been when that natural conflict, when that natural challenge comes to you, respect it in that manner with that meditation mindfulness. Patience and sit in that discomfort. What does that look like though? What do you mean? I sit in this discomfort with this pain, this error. Yes. Once upon a time ago, Sam was going to go to Australia. An error occurred and it was gone, washed away. Kavish. Oh no, what do I do with these miles? How dare this error happen? Sit in the pain, sit in discomfort, feeling. Dad? Yeah? Do you remember 30 years ago when I was in middle school? When we talked about going to Iceland? I can transfer these miles and we can go. I didn't think that was ever going to happen. Me neither, but I think it's happening. That's what the hidden asset in discomfort can produce. The patience part, best of wishes.
Thanks, Sam. I want to share a real quick personal experience that really just taught me that compassion fatigue and burnout are addictive. And what I mean by that is you can choose to do so many things for other people. You can spend your entire waking life truly serving others. You may find great pride and joy in that, but if you aren't spending any time on yourself, it's never enough. You'll never feel fulfilled. You'll always be missing something. When I was a high school teacher many years ago, I'd be the first one in the building at 5 a.m., preparing my slides for each class, each prep I had. I'd teach all day, I'd coach after school, and then I'd start grading, planning, reaching out to parents. I'd show up at doors with a pizza pie ready to talk about their kids' education. When I'd finally get home, it'd be time for bed. There'd be no wiggle room, no room for me. I say this because I was really proud of what I put into becoming the teacher I was, but at what cost? At the end of every day, there were still more things I could have done to care for my students. It was never enough. It was addictive, and not a single thing I did was for myself. That's burnout. Humans can't survive by denying their own needs. We have to be a little bit selfish.
Mine's a little bit different in the sense, for those of you, I've been here 13 years. So those of you who've been around me all this time, you know that teaching is my favorite thing. I like teaching. I like being in my courses. I like interacting with my students. So my balance is, how do I get to know my students better? That's my favorite thing. And what I would encourage you to do, if you have this format that you get to use as you teach online courses, I do all the PLOs, I do all the CLOs, I do all the WLOs. I hit all the marks I'm supposed to mark and being what I think is a great teacher. But then I go back to my announcements. And everything I told them about how to be successful in that week, I end with, tell me about your dog. Tell me about your cat. Let me see your cat pictures. Let me see your dog pictures. What book have you read this week? What thing did you do over the weekend? And we turn that into something that's easy for them to reply to. And we fellowship and we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy each other's movies, pets, and dogs. And it's just a great space. A double Dutch dog dare you to try that. You're going to love it.
I love all of these wonderful examples and recommendations. And this brings us to, I guess we might have a minute or two to the Q&A portion. If you've asked any questions in the chat that we didn't get to, or you have additional questions or comments, feel free to share them in the chat at this time, and we'll respond to them as time permits. And I will go ahead and scroll quickly past the references so that they're on the screen for the recording and people can pause the recording to share the screenshots. But while they're scrolling, feel free to, again, to go ahead and panelists to address any questions or comments.
Dr. Harper, I'm peeking at the chat. Lots of kudos for the team, the panel, the strategies. I'm wondering about, just as we're right about time, but just encouragement of how you can support colleagues. How do you support your colleagues when we're in a remote environment? How do I know that my colleague might be struggling a little bit?
Felicia, would you like to take that, or anyone?
A great question, Dr. Stewart, Olson Stewart, excuse me. A lot of the stages that I discussed earlier may not exactly fit any particular individual, but a lot of times when you know your colleagues, you know when they come in excited, they come in ready to hit the ground running. When you see changes of absenteeism is a one big factor that is usually noticed. If they're getting sick all the time, it may not be from burnout, but that is another factor that would be noticed. If they tend to not really take care of themselves the way that they used to, these are all different factors based on what you know about your colleague, that you could actually sense that they may be going towards burnout, or they may actually be burnout habitually. I'm going to drop the that assessment in the chat again. That provides a few different things that our colleagues can do. In addition, also, it lets you know where you fall as far as burnout is concerned. Is it low? Is it moderate? Is it high? Because just like when you get excited or when you're a little bit nervous about a performance, sometimes it helps you to perform better when you are. So it's not a bad, it's eustress is what we call it, and not de-stress. So we have to sometimes decipher what those differences are, but when we know our colleagues, usually a lot of those factors are noticeable. Let me grab that.
Thank you for that. And just to piggyback on that before, I know we're at time. Also, our loved ones sometimes carry our pain. So if I have to take off a lot because my hypothetical children, I don't have children, but sometimes colleagues' children are going through a lot. And there's sometimes it's their own stress, and sometimes they're carrying the stress of the adults in their lives as well. And it becomes kind of a vicious cycle, because we all impact one another. Well, thank you to everyone who participated, and also for everyone who assisted in this presentation. Now you see why I was so excited about this panelist. They're amazing and wonderful. And I just encourage you to continue to enjoy the Culture of Care Summit and take some time, take some break. Don't just stare at the computer all day. Get up, stretch, do something, be good to you. Thank you, everyone.
Very well said, Dr. Harper. Thank you so much for leading this amazing session, and a big thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing their time and insights. This concludes our session of Compassion Without Collapse, Fostering Resilience in a Culture of Constant Care. Thank you, too, for our attendees. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you found this conversation both helpful and inspiring. We encourage you to visit the UAGC Culture of Care Summit website to view and attend other sessions. Also, don't forget to vote for your favorite sessions. Make your votes count. Those links are available in the chat, and they're also available on the Culture of Care Summit website. On behalf of the University of Arizona Global Campus, thank you for attending and have a wonderful rest of your day.
And I know we need to get out of the room for the next people. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harper. That was wonderful. You made the process effortlessly.
Oh, you all brought the expertise, and I appreciate it. We'll see you soon.